Good evening, everybody. My name is Kirsty Mitchell and I suffer from ME. I'm going to try and present to you this evening my story. It is my story. Obviously, everybody who is diagnosed with ME or still is waiting their diagnosis, their stories are very different. I was 39. I was a regular gym goer. I was often at the gym 11 times a week, before work, after work. On top of that, I used to swim an awful lot as well. And one day I was in the gym. I was actually trying to do some sit-ups, and all of a sudden, whilst they're not my favourite exercise, I just couldn't do them. I had a 10-kilogram weight across my chest, put the weight down to the side, didn't really understand what was happening to me. And to my experience, it felt like there was a massive lactic acid build-up within my body. No clue what was happening. I just knew that I felt really ill, and this wasn't any way I'd ever felt before. I thought, wow, I'm really burning the calories tonight. This stupidly went on for 3 weeks before I went to the doctors. I turned up at the doctors absolutely exhausted in those 3 weeks. I had stopped going to my morning gym sessions. I was still trying to get up in the morning and go to work. I continued to work full-time today. And then I just sat down at the doctor's and I said, I don't know what's wrong with me, but I don't feel well. I happened to see a junior doctor who, in fairness to her, tested me for absolutely everything under the sun. It threw up a couple of anomalies, which ironically was touched on in the video that we've just all watched. My hormones were slightly out of sync. They weren't sure if I had thyroid issues. So it took a little bit longer for my diagnosis to come. But in September, I knew that that day was coming. And I had attended the doctors. And I sat down and I could see my blood test up on the screen. I knew there was still a couple of things not quite right. But I was waiting to hear what she had to say. And she said to me, there was nothing wrong with me, it was all in my head. Well, it wasn't in my head, it isn't in my head. It does make me extremely angry, but I managed to control myself. I was given a form to fill in, it was a questionnaire about my psychological state, so I completed it whilst I was in the doctor's surgery, handed it into reception. And then something in me said, if I don't stand up, if I don't find the energy to fight whilst I'm right here, this could be it. So I decided to say to the receptionist, I'm really sorry, I've seen a doctor this morning, I'm not happy with the way I've been spoken to and actually my diagnosis. So they arranged for somebody to call me back that afternoon. I had then made my way to work because that's what I'd done for 6 months because there was nothing wrong with me. And I was sitting in the office and the phone call came, so I moved myself into a storage cupboard because it was the only place in the office that was a bit more private. And I was told that I had ME. So I'm standing in a storage cupboard with a doctor on the phone, pretty much in the dark. And actually, that's what ME's like. It's like being in the dark because there's not enough information out there. There's not enough education out there for doctors to be able to pass on to their patients. There's not enough information out there for doctors to be able to look at somebody and say, this is what's happening to this person. After that, it took 6 months to get through. I was signposted immediately to Astley Ainsley, and that had a huge impact, positive impact on my life. And if it wasn't for that service, if it wasn't for that treatment, I don't know how I would be today. They took me through pacing therapy. I started off seeing a physiotherapist. She was lovely, we worked well together, but she did explain a few things to me which included car batteries, and to me that was like the offside rule in soccer. It did not compute. I did not understand whatsoever. So then she said, right, I think we need to get the psychologist in to see you. And I know that in the ME community, as soon as you mention psychology, the barriers, everything either goes up or barriers come down and you close down and you don't want to hear it. But what the psychologist was able to do was to break down the person who I was in order to help me deal and live with having ME. It's essentially, I suppose, in a way, I was an athlete. I was a competitive swimmer. I'd competed from a young age. I kept training, even though I'd given up competition, and I trained until I was 21. So that mentality is still with me today, but it needed breaking down to deal with ME, because everything I learned, everything I had been from a very young age was now alien, and I had to find a new way forward. So I was able to have 12 appointments across a year, and I'd started to panic by appointment 10, because I thought, if I don't come to my monthly appointment, who am I going to discuss these things with? Who's going to point out to me that using words like, I just went shopping, or I just wanted to go to the cinema, things like that. If you have ME, you cannot just do those things. So it so happened I was able to receive another appointment within a 12-month period after that. And then, thankfully, the Action for ME Mentor Programme, I'd seen them advertised on social media. They were looking for mentors, and I thought, brilliant, they're going to need someone to be menteed, that will be me. So I decided to apply. But you know what? Charities are there to step in where governments cannot. You have the opportunity to step in, and you need to work with and support Action for ME, not just within the pilot programme, not just within funding new clinical nurse specialists, but for what people who suffer from ME need today, what we need right now, not what we need in 5 or 20 years' time, but it's about today, so we can live our lives in the best possible way. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I'm John Eden. I'm the Scottish Huntington's Association Chief Executive. And you must be thinking, what on earth is somebody from the Huntington's Association gate-crashing our ME awareness-raising event tonight? But I hope that'll become a bit clearer as I talk to you. So bear with me and give me a little bit of latitude is what I'm asking for. So I think the first thing I wanted to say was that I wanted to acknowledge that as a fellow member of the neurological community, that there are particularly difficult issues facing people living with ME. I don't have ME, and I don't know anyone who has the condition actually, but I did recently have the privilege of working with a small working group who were collecting information about the lived experience of people with ME. So I have a couple of things to say about that. One is, well done, because my goodness, you guys got your voice heard, whether you know it or not. And as somebody who knew about ME and knew about some of the challenges, I was pretty shocked, pretty moved actually, to hear some of the things that I read about from people's experiences of accessing or not accessing health and social care services. And I was really struck by the stories of the lack of understanding of the condition. I was really struck by the problems with misdiagnosis. I was really struck, terribly struck actually, by the lack of empathy that many people seem to have experienced when engaging with health care professionals, and the subsequent sense of abandonment, I think, that came through because of that lack of empathy. And I was certainly very struck by the very patchy services that exist in Scotland for people with ME. So, what's interesting about all of that is, if I inserted the words Huntington's disease, the experience of many people with Huntington's could be virtually identical to that. Keith, you spoke, you put a quote up there about the role of specialist nurses and how, for lots of people with ME, one of the most important things that means is you don't have to explain from scratch what's wrong with you, and you get believed. If I were to ask people with Huntington's disease that question, I guarantee you they would say the same things. So there is something going on, isn't there? Because I don't think that either ME or Huntington's disease are particularly unique in the way that people have those kinds of experiences of healthcare services. And there is certainly something about the complexity of neurological conditions. There's certainly something about the fact that there's often no easy fix. So Keith said earlier, there's no cure currently for ME. There is currently no cure for Huntington's disease either. And actually, there's very, very poor knowledge of how to actually manage the complex symptoms that also arise from the condition. Interestingly for me, one of the mantras, if you're working with people with Huntington's disease, is no two people with Huntington's disease are the same. Their condition is unique to them, to the particular pattern of symptoms that they experience, the way the illness progresses, and to their personal and individual circumstances too. So, I hope that helps you to understand why there is a connection between ME and Huntington's disease, and it's in the lived experience of the people who are living with those conditions, I think. And I think the reason that that's important is that I certainly sense the ME community feel quite alone sometimes, actually, in their battle. And you're not alone, actually. And actually, one of my messages tonight would be, we need to get much better at talking to each other. And we need to get much better at collaborating and working collectively to influence the way that health and social care services are delivered. There are some great opportunities coming along. So as you will probably all be aware that there is, the Scottish Government are currently developing an action strategy for neurological conditions in Scotland, which was the reason I was involved in the work I was talking about earlier about lived experience. So there's one immediate forthcoming opportunity for us all to work to influence Scottish Government and to influence the way that this strategy is developed, and to make sure that the work that was done on understanding people's experience of living with the condition actually translates into something meaningful that will make a difference to your quality of life on a day-to-day basis. So I think Teresa also wanted me just to talk a little bit about some things that we've done and that I think have helped in our journey in supporting people with Huntington's disease. So the first of those is that last year we launched a national care framework for Huntington's disease. So I was quite interested to learn a bit about NICE standards, and I know there's a lot of, or a sense there is a lot of consternation in the ME community about the current NICE standards, but I believe that they're being reviewed. Having a set of standards is a really, really useful thing to have, because what ultimately matters is taking those to a local level. So replicate for ME, for example, replicating what happens in Fife in other parts of the country. But actually that battle is a lot easier if you have clear national standards that are agreed and provide a model of care. And that's very much what we found. So we've had the National Care Framework in place for a year now. We've spent the last year in what's called our localisation process. So we recognise that, Fife and Highland are completely different. So you can't just parachute a model in to every local area and expect it to look and feel exactly the same. It's got to be tailored to the individual communities. And actually that approach has been really successful because we haven't been rolling up to HSCP partners and saying, this is our model, you've got to do it. We've been rolling up and saying, we have a map here that understands what it's like to not just need symptom treatment, but what's the whole impact of this condition on people and what needs to be in place right across people's lives in order to support them effectively. And what we'd like to do is work with you on the basis of understanding how your local services work and how we can put in place what's needed to make sure that all the things that people require at different points in their journey with the condition are there. And I have to say, for the most part, people have been incredibly receptive to that approach. And we're now just about to complete our 6th local framework in Scotland. It's been a tremendous amount of work. It's been frustrating at times. You will inevitably meet local authority or health and social care partnership partners that don't quite want to get on board. But there are always ways around those difficulties, and I would certainly encourage the ME community to think about that. And then the last thing that Teresa wanted to talk about was our CPD programme for Huntington's disease. So we partnered with Stirling University, largely because they had a formidable reputation as a university that developed courses for dementia. Now, Huntington's disease, strictly speaking, is not a dementia. It has some similarities, but we thought they had the right kind of expertise and understanding. So our course is now in the 4th year of running, and we're in fact just about to expand it in its next iteration to run at Lancaster University and Stirling University, so that we can reach a much wider audience across Scotland and England. And I think what the course has done, and so has the National Care Framework, is it's helped to really raise awareness of Huntington's disease and put it much more firmly on the radar. But what it's certainly done is it's significantly changed people's understanding of how to support not just the individual who has the condition, but the whole family as well. And again, I would strongly encourage you to think about finding a university partner and developing a course to do that. It will make a big difference to professionals' understanding. So that's me. Thank you very much for listening to me.
Hello everyone. I'm the last person that you're going to hear from before we have our question and answers. And I just want to say thank you to Carol and Karen and Kirsty for sharing their experiences of living with ME so movingly. But also to Keith and Katie and John for giving their professional insights. What I'm going to talk about in more detail now, but not for very long, I promise, is the changes that people living with ME in Scotland have told us that they want to see, changes that we've already been working on with the Scottish Government to explore, and ask you to join us in making these changes a reality. So the work that we've been doing already, as part of our Inform ME Scotland project funded by the Scottish Government, we've been running a series of webinars for health professionals to help them get to grips with the complexities of ME. This is Emily. Emily is a pharmacist. She also has ME, and she led a webinar for GPs, physios, occupational therapists, and other healthcare professionals. Now, they said that having Emily's personal and professional insight into ME was incredibly useful. These are just some of the things that health professionals told us they didn't know before taking part in Emily's webinar. I'm not sure if you can read this, but one is that children can have ME, which Carol explained incredibly well. Not to recommend exercise. The importance of empathy and understanding the difficulties we experience, that's what all health professionals should be doing, and many do. Based on what we learnt from the webinars, we produced some professional briefings with key information for primary care professionals. We tested these with our patient and carer reference group first, and these have now been disseminated to professionals across Scotland. We also produced an information leaflet for patients, helping them to think about what sort of questions they need to ask their GPs and what to make sure they get out of their appointments. We have also worked with NHS Inform to update its website on MECFS, but as Gail so rightly said, there's still so much more that we can do. So we want to see some key changes for the people with ME in Scotland. The first is about investment in biomedical research. And as Gail mentioned, I'm delighted to report that we've already made some progress with this. In February, we launched a joint funding call for Scottish universities to fund a PhD studentship in biomedical research. I was really hoping that I was going to be able to tell you what the result of this was tonight, but it's not been finalised, so I'm not allowed. But it's coming very soon. We also want to see training education for health and social care professionals, and I think it's really clear from everything that you've heard tonight that this is absolutely essential. Imagine how much different Carol's family's experience would have been if they had seen a health professional who really understood the impact of ME. In order to develop this course, we want to work with National Education Scotland, with health professionals, but essentially with patients. Their views and experiences are essential in getting this right. They have to lead it. Our aim is that after undertaking the course, professionals would understand current research evidence, the impact of the condition, and feel confident in working with patients to discuss and agree the best way forward for them as an individual. We also want to see specialist services developed as part of a managed clinical network so that people like Katie don't have to use Tesco vouchers to fly to training that's hundreds of miles away, but they can access colleagues here like Keith and more of Keith to talk about good practice and how they can support people with ME. As John just pointed out, having this framework and a set of clear standards would be incredibly useful. All of these aims are part of our wider ambition to improve the lives of people with ME, not just here in Scotland, but in the UK and internationally. We are now working with other organisations to advocate for the needs of people with ME at an international level. Our aim is that over the next 3 years, the World Health Organisation and its member states, of which the UK is one, consult with people with ME properly, not just a tick box exercise, to lead a global public health response to ME. We want them to do this through adopting a formal resolution at the World Health Assembly. We've got a long way to go to get to this point, but work has begun. And we can only achieve this if we collaborate with others, not just organisations, but individuals, people like you, because we all want to see the same thing. And that's the question that I'm going to leave you with, because people have been waiting a long time, and the time for action is now. So come and talk to me, talk to Teresa, talk to my colleague Avril. Put your hand up, Avril. About how you can get involved in all the work that we've showcased here, and together we can improve the lives of people with ME in Scotland. Thank you.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I think you'll all agree that was some powerful testament that we heard there. We're going to set aside a few minutes for a Q&A, and all our speakers are ready and willing to answer any questions that you have. Just before we move on, though, I would like to draw your attention to the 4 latecomers that came in. You maybe wonder who they are. So we have Ben McPherson, MSP, we have Colin Smith, MSP, we have Liam MacArthur, MSP, and we have Tavish Scott, MSP. And I was going to say that Liam and Tavish were obviously on island time because they're from Orkney and Shetland, but the other two spoiled that joke. So who has a question for any one of our speakers? You don't have to have one. We can go straight to networking, and there's more wine outside if that's what you want to do. I'm sure that's, you know, if you want to have one-on-ones. Yes, gentleman here.
Understand what you're saying about education for GPs, for health concerned about is where that comes from. I've had through Joan McAlpine and I think it's Claudia Beamish as well, we've had letters from NHS Education Service for Scotland, which was it's rare for me to be so angry, but just absolutely taking everything from the case trial. I could almost say, I would use the word fraudulent, they're careful about that word, but certainly the trial which needs to be restated, shall we say, and they're pushing us down the MUS route, making ME, CFS, iniquity and the unexplained symptoms interchangeable. So until they reevaluate and move away from the PACE trial, I don't believe they're the people to be providing the education. So I was interested to hear about your Inform Emmy, and I imagine that is an awful lot without knowing it, but I imagine that's an awful lot closer to what is needing to be done.
Sure. So what you're talking about there is absolutely really well-founded concerns about two treatments, graded exercise therapy and cognitive behaviour therapy, that are currently recommended by NICE, but that's now under review. And I do wonder if there is now a case for reviewing the Scottish Good Practice Statement, which also mentions these treatments. I think the most important thing is that because of the way that governments in America and the Netherlands now have changed their advice, they no longer recommend graded exercise therapy or CBT. And because there's now no consensus about what the treatment is, that's, I think, one of the reasons why NICE have realised that they have to review this. They can't just present one side of the evidence. So any clinical pathway or training in Scotland that we would want to work on would very much be led by patients and their experience, but also looking at the whole range of evidence. So, you know, what's working in the real world, what's working for the patients that Keith sees, what's working for the patients that Katie sees. And I think a focus on behavioural treatments is not helpful. It's not people's behaviour that's the problem, it's the disease. And that's what we need to focus on.
Anyone else? Yes, Janet.
Just to pick up on Craig's point, I think what we would like to see the MSPs here taking forward this message that NHS Education for Scotland, which has got £440,000 of public funding, we would like to see the MSPs taking this forward and questioning why they are being funded while actually promoting treatments that potentially could harm people with ME. And indeed, they've commissioned the author of one of the lead investigators of the PACE trial to review their ME materials, which is something that I think people with ME take very seriously.
Yeah, I think we can all take that on board, absolutely. Yes, lady up the back.
Hi there, I just want to highlight something. The Times Trust, the Young People with ME Trust, did ask for some freedom of information, and they identified that all of the Scottish medical universities are educating their medical students with the knowledge and the information that ME is a functional disorder. So whose responsibility is that to take on board changing the education of the young professionals coming out who will be mostly the individuals diagnosing the people affected? You know, I'm an ME patient myself, and I met with a lot of scepticism and disbelief as with most of the people here. And the fact that they're still being educated and trained with that information in 2018 is really appalling, given all the research that's available, given all the information and the knowledge that we have. Jonah, that's completely inaccurate.
Yeah, it's a really good point, actually. And really disappointing, as you say, in this day and age when we're, you know, trying to move forward. If you want to speak to one of us one-on-one, and we will absolutely take that forward and try and get some answers and force change, because that's what we're here to do. And that's a really important point. Thank you. Yes, we've got Kelly and then Emma.
You mentioned the changes when you started speaking about the changes in the Scottish Government taking on PIP and the Social Security. I've been involved in the experience panels with that, and I found it a very positive experience, to say the least. And it's something, it links to something that John said, that our experiences with Huntington is very similar. I'm also on the board of the MS Therapy Centre in Leith, and the people with MS come to the centre and make up about 40% of their clients. They have a very similar experience to people with ME in all aspects of their treatment, despite MS having 10 times as much research funding than ME and half the number of people with it. Their experiences with the health system are actually very similar to our experiences, and they have specialist services.
Yeah.
I don't think that the breaking up of the health board services into local areas is necessarily going to improve matters further, because there is a need for condition-specific treatment, because as Keith said, you feel accepted, you feel acknowledged if you have that. But it's not just about the way the health board deals with us. It's about how society deals with us. And that social aspect of it, I think, is really important. If you look at the statistics, most people who recover from ME recover within 2 years. If you haven't recovered within 5 years, the odds are you never will recover. That's not to say it doesn't happen. I have a friend who's recovered after 22 years. And I hope, I've been ill for 24, I hope I'm going to follow in her footsteps soon. But I think we do need specialist services that address not just the health, but also the welfare. Because if people get a quick diagnosis and they get support right away, then they can recover. And they can recover within 2 years, and we could actually eradicate ME. But people need the support right away, and not the disbelief that still continues to this day. And it needs to be an integrated support with the welfare system, because too many people are fighting to keep their jobs. Yeah. And fighting to keep their homes and that kind of thing. And they just need to take their health seriously for a couple of years, and then they won't have to worry about it for the rest of their life or time.
Thank you. Emma.
Thank you. I am a member of the Health and Sport Committee, and we did an inquiry into the preventative agenda and looked at neurological conditions. Chronic fatigue syndrome and ME was never mentioned in any, which is I find really interesting on reflecting. And I've just looked at the documents that were submitted as evidence, but it's become a bit muddy in the waters because they talk about prevention of disease, but it's about prevention and keeping people out of hospital as well, and looking at a better health and social care agenda. So when I spoke to the Clarks about it, they said that it had been quite challenging looking at the preventative agenda, because there are neurological conditions that are acquired, and then there's some that are inherited, and then there's others that are infection related. So I find it very interesting. I welcome anybody to get in touch with me when we're done, because the report hasn't been written yet, so that we can look at pursuing maybe a further opportunity for engagement in whatever way would benefit everybody.
That's an excellent suggestion, Emma, and I would urge anyone that, you know, to go and take that offer up and speak to Emma.
And my background's 30 years of nursing, so I ken a wee bit.
She kens a lot. Have we got any other final? Right, oh, look, see, this is what happens now. Everybody, the hands start going. Right, so I've got 3 final questions. and then I think we'll do a bit of networking. So, lady sitting here first.
Hi, my name is Jennifer Dillon. I've had ME for 8 years. I was very lucky to be diagnosed in Fife and actually see Keith. I just recommend you and I've noticed that moving to Edinburgh, I do not have access to the same treatments that I had in Fife. They won't give me the prescriptions that I had before. And I just wonder how we tackle that. And the other thing I wonder how we tackle is ME it can come in different forms. People would look at me not think I have ME, I can work. I am one of the very lucky ones with mild ME. And when I go to my doctor in Edinburgh, she says, you know more about the condition than me, you have 8 years experience, and I'm a high functioning ME person, so there's nothing available for me. So how do we come up with something that can help people on the whole spectrum and make sure that if you're in Fife, you're in Edinburgh, you're getting the same level of treatment. It's not, oh, in Fife there's expertise, in Edinburgh, no, you can't get this, no, you can't get that, here's antidepressants.
Yep, absolutely. Really valid point. Thank you. So we will definitely take that on board, and we're all listening, and we're all from different areas as well. So we will take that on board. So I had a gentleman over here, and then I had the lady with the yellow top on. Yes, sir.
On the 4th of May, Canada held its first ME conference that had pretty much researchers from all over the world, but the UK was markedly absent. They were also absent last year at Stanford's first international ME conference. Canada has also established an ME medical network that's linking up with 3 that have been established in the US. Now I understand asking for more money and getting greater budgets is always difficult, but I mean, we are actually quite data rich with how the NHS works, and I don't get why we couldn't have similar sort of international conferences here. At a minimum, it would inform people here of what's happening, because at the moment, the research community is very much, seems to be in agreement that it's a biological condition, whereas the UK seems to be lagging quite behind on that front. And actually, most of the researchers generally spoke disparagingly about that view. So I don't have a medical background, but these people were quite accomplished in their fields, and so I think having them come over here and maybe enlightening community here wouldn't be amiss.
Yeah, international collaboration. Carl, do you want to respond to that?
So I know 2 conferences that go on here that are international. There's one by a charity called Invest in ME, and they have that on the 1st of June, I think, in London. And then there's the UK CFSME Research Collaborative, who will have their 5th conference in September. Last year, Jose Montoya came over from Stanford. But you're absolutely right. Linking all of these people up is absolutely essential. And I talked a very small amount about the international advocacy work that we're doing, and I'm going to make a beeline for you afterwards. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Claire. Lady in yellow, hi.
Sorry, I'm just picking up lines on a couple of points that were made. I was diagnosed with ME 15 months after I had to have major surgery because of an area cancer scare. So it was 15 months before I got the ME diagnosis. That was May last year. I got referred to the ME clinic in Edinburgh. I'm actually a Fifer, and I'd like to move back now. So I got diagnosed in May last year, got referred in June to the ME clinic. I've still got an appointment. So I ended up, as we all do, doing a lot of research online and came across an Australian programme, a private programme that's run, and I paid £1,000 to start that, and it's helped me. So I suppose it's just making all these points that the help isn't there from the start. If I'd got that, the diagnosis early on, it might help. But the other thing I'd like to say is that people with ME don't qualify for the flu jab, and I got the really bad flu, the Australian flu that was going round, and I was ill for about 4 months, and I'm only now getting back to health. And when I went to see my GP, she had said you can pay for the flu jab, so I would advise that you do that, but you don't qualify for it because any patients aren't on the list. So that's just a random little point, sorry, but
No,
maybe,
good points.
these kind of things as well, John, getting PIP, I haven't even bothered applying for that because what's the point?
Yeah.
I wouldn't get it.
Yeah, my friend was exactly the same. Okay, I just want to close by saying thanks very much. I mean, I hope it's been of benefit to you. It's certainly been of benefit to me. And you've got your other MSPs here as well. Talk to them, use them. That's what we're here for. If you've got any other points, email us. You know, we're here to listen, and hopefully we can get some positives coming out of tonight, and we can keep moving forward together. So thank you all very much for being so open. Thank you.